Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to Two Guys, a Girl in F1. And we're at the end of the season. Can't believe it. It was a long season. It felt like it went on forever. Fortunately, it really produced a good finish with three drivers contending for the World Championship. Of course, the Constructors' Championship had been settled a long time ago in McLaren's favor. And really, over this last stretch of three races, it kind of looked like McLaren was trying to find new ways to lose the Drivers' Championship. It was pretty remarkable. And of course, if you've been following the season, you know that at Las Vegas, both McLarens were disqualified because of excessive wear to the plank on the underbelly of the car. And then at Qatar, they made a really bad strategy call and cost both of their drivers the win in the race. And so you kind of went into the final race of the season at Abu Dhabi kind of wondering, okay, well, what new thing are they going to invent to screw this thing up for their drivers? And as it turned out, they delivered quite well, I thought, as did the drivers. Max and Oscar both knew that, for all practical purposes, Lando was in the driver's seat. Didn't matter where they finished. As long as Lando finished third, Lando was going to be the world champion. And so they knew that they had to beat Lando. And sure enough, Max went out and won the race in very convincing style. Oscar drove a very good race, finished second. And then Lando did what he needed to do and finished third. So really, the race wasn't so much about all the competition and all that. It was more about three drivers who knew exactly what they needed to do, with two of those drivers knowing that the championship leader had to screw up. And if they screwed up, if the championship leader screwed up, Lando Norris, then what that would mean is that for the rest of them, then they had to come in and deliver on the win. And so, they did what they needed to do, but so did Lando. And so I thought that McLaren actually made some really good strategy calls. They pitted Lando, and when he pitted, the field was set up in such a way that when he came back, he was right at the back end of a pretty fierce struggle in the midfield, and he used the fresh tires to work his way back up. Of course, there was the controversy with the getting past Yuki Tsunoda. Yuki was told by Red Bull, hey, you need to hold up Lando, blah, blah, blah. And Yuki says, yes, I know what I'm supposed to do. And then, it was wide open going down one of the straightaways, and Yuki, started weaving to prevent Lando from passing him, and Lando, wound up getting forced into the dirt, but passed him and then just moved on. I thought it was real interesting that Ferrari, after having such a terrible qualifying, really struggling. I mean, Leclerc somewhat, but Lewis big time struggling. Ferrari actually did very well. In each of the stints when the Ferrari got fresh tires, there would be a stage where it appeared like Charles might be able to threaten Lando just a little bit. But then as the stint would wear on and the tires were starting to go off, it was very clear by the gap that you would see appear when Charles's tires went off, and they went off much sooner than the McLaren's. And then Lando would pull away. And so, but I thought Leclerc drove a very good race. I thought Lewis drove an exceptional race, considering that I think he qualified 16th, so he didn't even make it out of Q1. But then he came back really a very much a fighting drive, and I believe he finished 8th. And honestly, I thought that he was one of the guys that was deserving of drive of the day. I don't know that there's too many guys that are going to miss the ground effect cars. And certainly Lewis is not one of them, but he really got up on the wheel and pedaled the car. And I thought he did just a great job. Another drive that probably everybody missed was Fernando Alonso coming in 6th in that Aston Martin, which, a lot of people reckon that car is like the 8th fastest car on the grid. And so for him to come in 6th behind, a Red Bull and two McLarens and a Mercedes, and got to think about who else. No, that was it. And did really, really well, and so, and a Ferrari. I thought really that he acquitted himself very well. And somebody asked Fernando, they said, well, now that Adrian Newey has been promoted to team principal, has he had an effect on the car? And he says, yeah, he touched it. So I thought that was a really good line. But, I think, for people who are really happy to see this season close and say goodbye to the ground effect cars, I don't know that any of the drivers were sorry to see those cars go. There was so much hope for them when they first came out that it would make for better racing and all that. And certainly, with the formula now being very mature in its development cycle and all that, the field was very, very close. And, there's a lot to be said for all of that. Passing was still very difficult. But at the end of the day, I think those cars were taking a physical toll on the drivers because of how stiffly they had to be sprung to keep them off the deck. And I think a lot of the drivers are just now starting to speak about, the pounding that their backs were taking from those cars. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see what they think of with the 2026 cars. And Sabrina and I will be doing an introduction to the new regs that'll be coming out very soon. What's interesting is that this offseason is going to be very short. I saw a deal where they were speaking to James Vowles from Williams, and James said, hey, we've got about 5 weeks and we're going to be back on track with the brand new cars. So I think it's going to be really, really an interesting lead up to the new season. Of course, they're not done in Abu Dhabi yet. Starting on the Tuesday after the Grand Prix, there is a day of testing for Pirelli as they go through and start testing the new tires that they'll be using in 2026, using the 2025 cars that have been changed to reduce the downforce, because the new cars have a very much reduced downforce as compared to what this year's cars had. And then on Wednesday is the young drivers test. And so guys like Pato Award will be in for McLaren. And of course, the friend of our podcast, Jack Crawford, he's going to be driving again for Aston Martin, which is pretty exciting. So looking forward to seeing how Jack does on Wednesday. And so that kind of wraps up the season, I think. It was very much an up and down season, and Sabrina and I will be doing an end of year review where we go and we grade the drivers and the teams, and then take a little bit of a look forward. So thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the race. I thought it was a really interesting tactical / strategic race. Oscar was pitted when he needed to be pitted, given the position he was in. Lando was pitted when he needed to be pitted, and their strategies were very different, but they played out just exactly what each driver needed to see. And then, of course, Max put in another dominating performance, and, we close out the year, and Max won more races than anybody else. So there you go. It's, he didn't win the world championship. He missed it by 2 points, but once again, he had the most wins of any driver in the season. So well done to Max. I'm going to be really interested to see what Red Bull produces next year for a car. So thanks for listening, and we'll be talking soon.